Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome to another live stream. This is a weekly discussion point where we talk about all things cladding and also all things, I would say, safety. I think safety is an overall topic. But today we're talking about something, some quite sad, some outrageous in my view. But to start us off, I think Hamish McClay.
Well, in keeping what we sort of speak about, we largely feature on this particular podcast on the subject of cladding. However, the cladding in itself is just the exterior of these buildings. And we all know that there's challenge within the compartmentalization inside of that cladding. But the big challenge is to do with cladding. And we've actually sort of found the seriousness of the situation where not only do we have cladding, which is in itself a risk factor in terms of the fact that it can catch fire and it can burn if the incorrect material is used or that cladding is connected using the inappropriate types of connections. Like, for example, instead of using metal, they use plastic, which catches fire, which seems to be a daft way of doing things. And what we have a standard which they've suggested is, this one's passable. This pass 9980, that's absolutely sort of great. That suits everybody. Well, it doesn't actually suit anybody other than the builders, because it means they can do what's effectively a cheap remediation, it doesn't help the residents. It still contains fire risk material. It also means that it's hard to get a mortgage if you get a mortgage at all. And it's not just that aspect; it's the fact that the management company that are running the place tend to charge you more money. There's all sorts that go wrong with it. And that's Royal Artillery Quays. Now, what has been demonstrated this week, in the last sort of couple of days, is a horrendous situation, worse even than Grenfell. And in excess of 100 people have now actually sort of died as a cause of this particular sort of calamity. And people are trying, now this is one of the interesting things as well. In Hong Kong, they use bamboo, which is much lighter than scaffolding, apparently much more flexible, and apparently much more practical. And they say, well, that goes up like, well, of course it will, but that's on the exterior of the building, because that's gone and done. And if you actually look at any shot, don't do it, because it only happened accidentally, because wherever I've looked today, I've travelled back from Birmingham this morning. I get onto the train and picked up one of the papers somebody had left on. They call it, I don't know if you can see the outline there.
Yeah.
Three held as bamboo scaffold burns down flats. The bamboo scaffold didn't burn down the bloody flats, for heaven's sake. It was the materials that were used in the construction that caused the burning down of the flats, which caused the death of over 100 people. Now, the interesting situation is, in this particular sort of country, for whatever reason, they've actually already arrested 3 people in conjunction with this for manslaughter. They've already arrested them and saying that's what they're charging with, manslaughter. And
how many years are we post Grenfell? Was it
7, 8?
Yeah, 7 or 8. Yeah.
And is anybody in the ring for that?
No. But when you look at the situation, and this is what worries me, we have a council. We don't need to mention the fact that it's Greenwich Council, because they're responsible.
Do not mention Greenwich Council, please. It's not some other council. Yeah.
But 80% of that particular council have suggested that the building in which these residents, which exceeds 1,000, I'm not speaking about hundreds now, there are thousands of people living in these flats. They're fire shafts, basically. They're not actually sort of shafts, because those shafts actually are surrounded with materials, which there's only one way out of those flats. From 16 stories up, or whatever the height they go to. Steve will tell us what height they go to. And the council turns around and says, there's nothing wrong with those flats. They were perfectly all right at the time of build, only because the building inspectors at the time choose to pass a situation without fire doors. There's no fire doors. to prevent the fire from spreading up this shaft anyway. There's materials in that shaft, there's glass in that shaft. How the heck can firefighters get in and save people? The compartments inside that building are meant to last a certain time period. And there's some of the compartmentalization is absolutely horrendous. There's gaps in it, cans of Coke in it, all sorts of stuff stuffed in the walls, those internal walls. And what are they doing? They're papering it up, sort of. They're sort of doing the cladding.
But they're papering over the cracks, are they not? Steve, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for that style. Now, before we talk about Hong Kong, can we get an update as to what is happening as far as Royal Artillery Quays? Because apparently these flats were fine at the time of building, as Hamish had said.
Well, we've debunked that. So, of course, the Royal Artillery Quays, that's 8 blocks of flats, 2 above 16 stories. We know that at the bottom of each story there should have been fire doors protecting the escape stair. Those were never installed. They were on the plans and they were on the building regs, so that's a fail. We know that they used plastic fixings, dot and dab, and incorrect render thickness on the external highly flammable petrol-based substance that they put on our walls as insulation, so that's a fail. We know that out of 8 flats surveyed, 159 defects were found internally, so that's a fail. And you'd have thought, gosh, it's so bad at Royal Artillery Quays, you know, that we would actually have a full remediation. And we did fight for it, and we did manage to get a full remediation of that flammable petrol stuff, because they only wanted to do a partial one, and presented a plan very secretly to us to basically to get us to accept the partial remediation. But because we got the cladding manufacturer involved and fought, you know, tooth and nail, that didn't happen. But, you know, Hong Kong is an example of where, you know, cutting corners with remediation is happening. And what's very interesting, if we have a look at it, so I'm firstly, my thoughts and, you know, prayers are with those 128 people who very sadly lost their lives as a result of a fire which didn't need to happen. And we've actually got, you know, a thread which basically shows a very small fire at the base of one of the towers. And it basically created a chimney effect. And it had 2 elements. It had this bamboo scaffolding, and it had this this kind of green plastic mesh that melts flaming droplets as it catches fire. And that combination of this mesh, the chimney effect that it creates, and the bamboo, which obviously is highly combustible where a significant ignition source occurs, is what happened. And I'm looking at a thread which is basically saying that residents witnessed construction workers smoking at the base of the tower. It says in March this year, a resident at the tower complained workers were resting and smoking on the scaffolding, and that the foam board was flipping off. That's the combustible board. The residents had complained to the consultant contractor management office and legal authorities. I wonder if they spoke to their council about their smoking, you know, resident constructors that were there.
Well, I don't know if there's any similarity to the way Greenwich Council, they'll say that nothing to see here.
Well, that's probably very much like it happened. But what we don't fully know what the ignition source is. But what we do know is that, you know, it's killed 128 people. It was on the outside. The remediation was done on the cheap. It's very clear it was. And I suspect it's going to have quite a lot of commentary because, you know, as we said, it's a bigger fire than Grenfell. And I think it was needlessly avoided. But then let's go back. So that clearly is a massive failure of statecraft in Hong Kong, of the fire industry, and so on. So what do we have in the UK? We have this watered down PAS standard, which is attracting a lot of criticism. So we previously covered the Association of British Insurers, who condemned it and actually tried to make an amendment to PAS to actually deal with all the building risks that are remaining. But we've got something even better today, which has come out. So there's a chap called David Jones,
Right.
who is the Institute of Construction Management, sorry, and that was founded in 1842. He's the president. And so, bear in mind that this watered down PAS 9980 standard is being used on all publicly funded remediations and all developer contract remediations. And it's being used to look at these external facades that we've seen in Grenfell and we've seen in Hong Kong, where it's gone catastrophically wrong. So the president of the ICM says this: the watered down PAS 9980 standard is inherently dangerous, being used to answer a binary life safety question: is this facade safe? With a highly subjective sampling-based scoring framework that cannot reliably quantify either likelihood or consequence of a facade fire spread in real buildings. And he goes on to say, PAS 9980 is contentious and imperfect and traps residents in buildings where the external walls remain a vector for the next facade fire tragedy. And that is his view on this standard. So we've got the fire chiefs that have condemned the building safety regime from the government for leaving defects other than cladding, these non-cladding defects on the buildings. We've got the Association British Insurers confirming they're not dealing with all the risks and you can enjoy a permanently high insurance. And thirdly, we've got the ICM coming out, the president saying it's actually a dangerous standard and he condemns it wholeheartedly. So, the list of supporters of PAS 9980 draws thin. And I would say that the only people that want it are the government, the fire engineering community, who are, I'm afraid to say, compliant. I'm sure they're decent people individually, but ultimately, I don't hear them speaking up. They're happily taking money for these fire risk assessments with PAS. But really, in my view, they should actually say, no, we will not allow this regime to use my fire credentials to sign off on this report, which says, yeah, leave a load of combustible product on the fire shafts at rack.
May I stop you for a second? I just noticed a whole bunch of people viewing the show on X and YouTube. I just wanted to say thank you very much. This show is all about supporting, amongst other things, Steve, but in the wider term, better building safety standards. That's what we're fighting for here. The purpose of this was set in place by Hamish because it needs to be spoken about. Hamish, why is this channel so important?
Well, because all too often we hear of the occasional disaster. We went through a phase, I can't even remember now because we've been working on it so long. Was it this year, Steve? We had something like 3 different fires broke out in 3
Yeah, we had Dagenham, didn't we? That was a big one last summer.
But I mean, what we've actually sort of got, and one of our colleagues, a tremendous colleague that we have, who is looking after the welfare of people in this particular type of situation, she's actually sort of, let me just sort of grab this, because what we fail to do so often is to think about, it's okay, let's think in terms of whether the building's sort of safe or not, but what about the mental health of the people that are in these buildings?
Human cost.
And it's human cost. And Melissa particularly works very, very hard with those groups of people. I can't actually find it. I really wanted to read it out. But do have a look. If you can actually sort of find Melissa, can you remember Melissa's surname? Anyway.
Melissa White. Yeah, she runs an organization called Kind Stay. So shout out to Melissa, and her organization is to help those going through remediation deal with all the effects of it on the person. And
Melissa's a damn good egg, absolutely. Well, as are you, Steve. It's impressive. So many people, and let's face it, some of them have even cornered you in the street. So many people just want to let sleeping dogs lie and just let them get on with it, and it will all be fine in the end. When we both know that they'll take the shortest possible route, do the most minor job of remediation so they can get through this as quickly as possible and brush the rest of it under the carpet. And that's not on. Not if they're leaving your property that you've plowed some of your life savings into in a state where it's still a fire trap. Sorry.
And I think a lot of people, Gareth, they can't take it anymore. I do wonder about the mental health of people, you know. They can't take my updates on fire safety. They can't take the fact that after 2 years of, you know, having your windows locked so you can't open them, and having all this netting all over your windows and being boxed in, that it's still not going to be okay. And we could still have the 10 grand a year service charge because of the insurance, you know, after going through all of that pain and also the internals, you know. Why aren't we having that done? And, you know, so I have asked the freeholders, Backpen and Dates and Management, Solitaire, and I've asked them to fund a remediation contribution order, which they're considering at the moment, to actually force Barratt to do the full remediation, to override PAS. And there is a way of doing it through the courts. But unfortunately, you know, it's very expensive if you use a legal representative. It's about £500,000. So that's prohibitively expensive. So
this is bizarre. You are in a situation completely not of your making, and yet effectively they're saying, well, you're stuck in this nuttiness because we know that it's too expensive for you to fight. Well,
this is why I worked with Lord Greenhouse, the Minister of State for Fire Safety at the time on the Building Safety Act, and I said, if we push this to the first tier tribunal, you will have a prohibitive cost, basically, and that's what we're seeing. And I'm seeing it played out at RAC. If we want to get the stuff off the fire shaft, which we shouldn't have to pay anyone to do.
No,
if you want to do it, you can enjoy your £500,000 in your bill. And if you want it off, you better pay. And if you can't pay, and you may lose as well. You know, it's absolutely appalling. And so we have to have consumer protection legislation. It's not going to be through the courts, and we have to keep pushing for this. And and we've got, you know, we're saying that we need more lobbying for more powerful bodies, because you know, you can see what happens. We do around in the Lords, it gets voted down, and we keep going, right? So this time round, we're doing a lot of financial analysis on the financial exposure to unremediated buildings. We're looking at all the bonds that have been issued to see if they even mention the defects, and all the insurance policies on those bonds. And oh dear, it seems to be that people have been too honest about what's on these bonds, about the risks. They don't even mention the building safety liabilities that may come the way of the poor, unsuspecting investor. So be prepared for a big financial statement where we're going to rattle the markets to push the Treasury to basically implement our amendments against the will of the government. But it's the only way, and it will start with the banks, because they're the ones holding the risk.
Hamish, would you care to take us home, please?
I mean, as we speak at the moment, we know of somebody that is looking into very much of what has gone seriously wrong with what should be a regulated cause, which should in fact be the building control side of these, but it is not being investigated. It should be. There are standards which should have been met. They were not met. However, whoever was responsible for the building control at the time didn't bother doing anything. The fact that the building control from the council itself said this building is unsafe, particularly because of the absence of certain things, the fire doors particularly were mentioned. They were overridden by what the council said. But let me just read to you, and we'll finish off with this. This is something that Melissa wrote, and everywhere I go, because as I said, I got on the train from Birmingham to come here today, and basically I picked this paper up, and it was open at that particular sort of page. Melissa on LinkedIn has written this: unsafe buildings aren't headline. This is why we have to keep doing this. This is why more and more people need to get involved. They're life or death for the people living inside them. As the world watches the horror in Hong Kong, my neighbour's building in the UK was wrapped in scaffolding 2 years ago with 6 hours notice, and still costing its residents thousands. The first 5 blocks to be evacuated. Behind the screen and the screens and scaffolding, these injustices are quietly happening every day. 5 to 10 times the insurance. Service charges still demanded from homeowners who've been evacuated. Families placed in poor quality temporary accommodation. Companies growing revenue for remediation works while residents bear the stress, disruption and uncertainty. I mean, I could go on and on and on. This is just a reminder, and hopefully the council members everywhere should be thinking about their residents, and before they pass on and say, oh, that's up to the builders, that's perfectly okay. We need to rely on the builders for housing. You need to rely on the builders for safe housing. These development people have cut the corners. They should be paying for the remediation. They should be the ones putting it right.
Building development most foul. I think that'll be my next book. Look, thank you so much once again, Hamish McClay of Search Convey, who our Lord and Master, who put this together with me in the first place, and Steve Day, that we are firmly 100% square behind as he tries to promote good building safety practice, along with Lord Lytton, who to come together with the new building safety standards that mean that when the builders screw up or do not complete their projects to the sufficient standard, they have to pay. It shouldn't all become landing fair square on the residents. It makes no sense at all. And on top of that, if you do remediation work, it should improve your standing with the insurance folk, not have no effect. That's what is the point of that? All right. All right. I'm going to wind up here and say thank you both, and to all of you watching. Thank you all for the new viewers. It's lovely to see you. Please do keep watching. We do talk about these topics that are in the public eye, that have an effect on many thousands of people in, it turns out, multiple countries. We've had everyone from Lords, we've had MPs, we've had ex-premiers of Australia. We have a lot of people who are interested in making sure that they pick up their stick and wave it at the relevant parties and trying to get them to take notice. But okay, for now, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please, in the midst of this maelstrom of madness, please try and keep hold of your mental health. Until then, bye-bye.
There's a tale about some folks with hammers and some nails. They'll polish you the moon.